welcome to Josef's Model Railway and Toy Room. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, just a little bit of housekeeping. You don't need to like, follow, or subscribe. You're busy enough out there on YouTube videos, so don't worry about me. Just put these out here for a little bit of light-hearted entertainment and a little archival for future generations to see what I did in my existence. Now, in today's video, it's Giddy Up, Cowboy, because we're going to go on a bit of a steeplechase. We're creating a bit of an equestrian scene with the horse steeplechase type of situation. Once again, we're going to return to the corners that we have on our loops on this particular layout. Now, as you'll recall, over at Noodle Knocker Junction, 3 out of the end sections we needed to do, 2 have been created. The first was, of course, our golf tee box, where we have our golfers come in and then tee off to the hole. And on the other side, we have the putting green on a particular hole that we've done. And as I've discussed, I could not be happier with how all that worked out. So in this particular section, we are going to make our way over to the other loop, or the Faulty Towers loop. So what we're expecting to see on this loop, it will be raised up a bit, and I'm going to try and recreate the Faulty Towers Hotel from the popular TV show, the sort of black and white type of building, car park, and have a sloped up raised section for where it's sitting on, and love to have a sign out the front that is similarly modeled on its location that would read something along the lines of flowery twats. Now, that's all for another day, and as I've always discussed, that's probably one of the last landscaping features we'll get to. But in the meantime, on this particular loop, we have 1, 2, 3 corners. This one over here will probably end up being some sort of a pedestrian crossing going down into a national forest or something like that. No idea on that one, so that could be a surprise. But this one I thought might be nice to have a little bit of an equestrian scene going. So of course I did a little bit of research and Googling around on some images. I knew in my head what I wanted, and it was probably this one photo here was what I was chasing. And I really think I have captured this nicely. And this is basically the approach about how I've gone about building it. So I thought what we'd have is the show jumps that you see, and then create the feature water jump that you'll see in a lot of courses, which, to be fair, I always think is a little cruel on the horses. That's a pretty tough discipline to basically force them into, but here we go, and this is what we've created. Just like we did with the golf scene, this is built on our XPS foam board, and it was a module that could be lifted in and out. Now, I'm not going to lie, I would have preferred it to be a little bit thinner, because I did create this wonderful rock wall, which I purchased, which is in a different scale, and I textured nicely, and I put it in the oven, and I've bended it to give it a nice bend, and it looks good. And if this was just maybe this much lower, or if I built this particular section on the board, would really look quite good. But that being said, we would completely lose it and not be able to see it because of our wonderful Hornby red trim that we're using around the cabinet work. Just grabbing our cheap water-based paints that we use when we are kids. I've just taken a brush, a little bit of water, and I just applied a little bit of color to this pre-made stonework I picked up on the cheap. I've just done a little bit of just a bit of a black to soften it down and take that plastic gray sheen off of it, and then just went across and then just tiger spotted it with a little bit of the kind of golden yellow there. And I think once it comes up, we then wait till it dries a bit. We come over with a dry brush and we'll get a nice finish to that, which should blend in nicely to the scene. After 48 hours, you can still see we still have a little bit of PVA glue that will dry, and that is going to go completely clear. We've had 2 coats of that. And what's great about it in this application is that it is going to be a nice sealer for when we put the water in, but also on the little lips and edges, even though we'll brush it over with the water, it gives that nice finish as though it is a bit of a moist puddle area. So when it came to joining these 3 pieces, and again, the reason why they are
this shape is that was the biggest I can pass them through the hot wire cutter and get straight edges because the wire isn't any higher than that. So we ended up with 3, but as you can see, that worked out quite well. And of course, to join them, you can probably see same process as we've used before. It's pop sticks, albeit the only difference between it with the bigger ones, I just put the actual pop stick in. With the smaller one, I'll generally just give it a quick cut on either side, something in this affair like this. And then, of course, we have this nice sort of drop of glue, stab them into position, and that's how we're creating this nice and strong. Works out quite well. So, what we're going to do, we are now going to paint it brown, dust the rest of the dirt on to give it that look, and then we can carry on. So, as you can see, the paint is still certainly very wet. And we obviously also took a little bit of diluted PVA, 50% PVA, 50% water, a couple of drops of dishwashing liquid just to break it up. And just in some key sections, I just sort of dribbled it around, and then we've just given it a really good dusting of our fine dirt that we've talked about in an earlier video about how to make. Now what we're going to do, this actually isn't quite as thick as it might look. By the time it goes, once it's all dried and we tap it upside down, all the excess is going to just tap off and it will reduce the weight of this at the moment. However, we're going to let it just dry. Once it's done, then we can brush it over. We'll put some sort of a blended turf on it, and then we'll start building up our static grass accordingly.
A lick of a brown paint. Again, as I've always mentioned, swamp green seems to be a popular brown that I like to go for. And then I'll dust it with some real dirt. And of course, then I'm just coming along with the static grasses and building it up and just putting the bushes as I've talked to. Scale model scenery. This foliage mat is really, really good stuff. You can just put it in place and there it is. So if you say, I don't like that bush there, then take the bush away. It really doesn't matter. I think it's a wonderful product and fantastic stuff. So the process though, unfortunately though, I thought I could speed things up with the drying process. So I put it, of course, my weapon of choice for quick drying is putting it in the car against the front windscreen on a warm day. Of course, on this particular day, the inside of the car temperature exceeded 73 degrees Celsius. And I got a bit of a bow from it. So as a result, it probably could be sitting a little bit flatter, and it doesn't. And if we do look closely, and here are a couple of close-up shots, if I just move a couple of these bushes, you will see some discrete little screws that are sitting there, keeping it flattened down, which again, I'm not really planning on moving this module in or out too much anyway. The water effect, of course, that is being used here is my weapon of choice is, of course, the Woodland Scenics Realistic Water. This is a wonderful product. However, just even appreciate, while this wouldn't be more than maybe less than 1/4 of an inch deep, right, it does need to be done in layers. It will shrink. And of course, the other issue is that you do need to build upon it in layers. So don't panic too much. It's a great product to work with. My #1 tip on the first pour and subsequent pours is once you've done it, just take a small brush and just gently tease the water out. And that's what's going to give you that sort of moistened look around the corner there where it's sort of seeping. And of course, I just took a little bit of extra on the brush and dab a few blops down, looking like as the horses come off and the water's dripping off the hooves, it's just creating a little bit more of an effect there. Again, the trees, they're all just your standard pre-bought things. There's nothing fancy here. A couple of ornamentals. The Rolex jump here, I did trim a bit of hedge from the other side if you look at it. And these are just some knock flowers that we've put in. The stone is that same sort of stone sheet we used at the retaining wall on Noodle Knocker Junction. And the stick work here is just a stick from the garden. And I textured it up with what is known as a light rust from Vallejo. It's almost an orange. In fact, just looking at this can, it's almost this color. But if you just give it a couple of light coats and let it bleed down, especially into a timber like that, with the stick, it's going to soak in and just create its own color. And I'm really happy with how that log has come about. The horse riders themselves were purchased in a kit from Preiser, I believe it was. There are a few others, but I just needed a couple of people that are actually riding a horse most of the time. They're sort of being led on the ground, but I really think it finishes it up quite nicely. If I was half clever with a 3D printer, I probably would have created the horse and a mid-action shot of Auric coming down with both feet about to take the landing and the water splashing out. Maybe that's a future Josef's problem. Who really knows? A really, really tremendous little scene that we've created here. Now, as we've been discussing throughout other videos, this is not the permanent backdrop. I just found an image that suited what was going on. I printed it up, and as you can see, just took some painter's tape, attached it, and it gives us a little bit of depth. So that grand master plan that we're doing for a backdrop will be coming up in future videos. However, before we conclude this video, I thought we might just try something a little bit different when it comes to framing up some of the shots that you've seen. And in this situation, while I don't have the exact image I want, I thought rather than being clever with Photoshop and photo editing tools, maybe there's another way we can look at creating a little bit of realism in creating a backdrop. So join me now in a little bit of an experimentation. Now, I just found a few images that seemed appropriate. They're actually from an actual steeplechase course in the US. Now, what we can do is get them printed out and just trim them up accordingly, and away we go. Now, the secret weapon is a stick. Now, what am I up to with the stick? Well, I'll show you what we're up to here. This is the image I think will work well, and basically it's the same image, but it's been flipped around. So I think you see where I'm getting at. My theory is, if we put this in, now as you can see we've got a slightly different backdrop, which could work, although the distance in those fences doesn't quite look right, but doesn't matter. And my concept with the stick is basically you would just, I'm not going to insert it in at the moment, but you can see the approach I'm going for here is if we can take it and mount the stick in just the right angle, this top would have to be snapped off, I believe. Just for the sake of the photo. Now, it's not perfect, but the great thing is I'll get the photo down and take a few pictures, but you can see sometimes, and again, I probably need one that's a little whiter and I could texture that. But my point here is that you can really open the door up with trying to find an alternate way of doing things. I don't think this works too badly. I certainly think we could drop this down further and get the fence line to run down. It's all about giving you a visual approach. Again, the permanent backdrop hasn't been done. Who knows what it's going to look like. Well, girls and boys, ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you so much for joining me today. As mentioned, these little dead areas are a bit of an interesting one, and I think we can create a scene because otherwise usually all we do is just put a few trees or static grass down and we just say that's the end of it. But really drawing people right out and making the most out of your layout, even if you've just got a standard 6x4 foot oval layout, and the feature always seems to be toward the middle and the trains themselves, these ends can be really, really useful, and a little bit of thought and you can create something amazing. To which, so it doesn't take long. Apart from glues drying and things like that, I wouldn't have put more than probably about an hour into creating this entire scene. Now, that's important because I had a family member come up and visit me during Christmas, and we took probably about 10 minutes, if even that, and I just showed him. I had a scrap bit of this foam board we nipped off with a bit of the hot wire cutter. I quickly just laid a bit of brown paint down. While it was still drying, I dusted some dust on top of it, put a few stones on, and then I started layering up a few different bits of static grass onto the scene and stuck a tree in and a blackberry bush. Some of the crushed up leaves, I always make mention the trick of doing that. And all of a sudden we're starting to create a scene that, let's be fair, is not all that bad. I mean, for less than a few minutes terraforming before his eyes, he was quite impressed. And I guess that's the idea I'm just trying to get out to you in these videos, is that, you know, let's get simple, sensible, and we don't need to spend a great fortune on creating a tremendous diorama. As always, a little bit of after housekeeping. For those of you that are wondering, there seems to be a plastic air pillow behind you. Yes, I've mentioned it in previous videos. The reason until I come up with something better is it's just there that when I come to this section, I don't want to bash my noggin on this particular edging of the cabinet. It's already enough. I've got a noodle knocker junction over there. I don't need my noodle knocked around with the end of this cabinet. Hence why you'll see it. There will be something better coming up as a solution around there. But this one particularly is right here. The other one is a bit more protected and sheltered because of the audio-visual solution hanging on the wall over there. So we'll carry on with the building of what we need to do. We're heading back over to our canal section. We've still got work to do there. And our coastal section is nearing completion. The reason that video is still seems like an eternity away is that it's some of the more finer details that I'm going through that we're still trying to tidy up. Would be great if I could have a backdrop on there before I get the shoot out to you. That won't happen. Of course, delays can't be helped when channel markers and things that have arrived have come in completely smashed to smithereens. And of course, that's taking another 2 to 3 months for the replacements to arrive. Progress will keep on happening. I hope you've enjoyed the video. So until the next one, stay safe. Toodles!